So it's a great pleasure to introduce Chels Marshall and Jill Wheaton Abraham, who are going to tell us all about Nobodyz Trash, the Marine Debris and Indigenous Peoples Network. So please help me welcome them to the stage.
Thank you. I first want to acknowledge and thank the Larrakia Nation and mob for having and hosting such a fantastic Indigenous network conference on country. You all probably have been noticing beautiful moon rises and great weather, and the land has just made it all really cool for us, which I'm thankful for. We're going to run this very much like a skewed sort of workshop where we would love for you guys to participate in what we're doing. So we don't really want to stand here talking to you guys the whole time, but we will do a short presentation just to let you know about what Nobodyz Trash is and what we're hoping to achieve out of the network. So it's very interactive. You guys have all been given a survey sheet. We would love if you were to fill those out and hand them back to Jermaine, who was at the door, and also to write some of your words on our two whiteboards. So we've put some questions up there that we would like to have your input on. If you guys could fill or take some time to write on that, that would be much appreciated. I'd also like to introduce one of my special friends, Jill from the Kootenai tribe in Idaho. Jill and I actually met in Hawaii. My home country's totem is the ocean. And when we met, we started talking about that sort of stuff. And I'll let Jill introduce herself.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. I too would like to acknowledge the Larrakia people and thank them for letting us come to their place and enjoy the beautiful space here. As Chels said, I'm from the Kootenai tribe of Idaho. It's a long ways from here, but I'm not very good at introducing myself. I'm an anthropologist. I'm currently a graduate student in applied anthropology at Oregon State University, and I really studied archaeology for a long time, but I'm also a surfer, and as traveling different places to surf, I started to see plastic everywhere I went, and even extremely remote beaches in northern Baja California, and that kind of inspired me to start researching this topic. So it kind of brought us here today, thanks to Chels.
I like to think I'm tech savvy, but there could be a few technical problems, like with this. Yeah, me too. I know what you're feeling. Is that better? Awesome. If I start to shout, let me know about that as well, because I get a little bit emotional on this subject. Let's try this. Yeah. All right. So I'll just talk a little bit about Nobodyz Trash. It's connecting people and connecting oceans. So it's pollution, Indigenous people, and the marine environment. We had lots of different names for a title. Some of them are quite funny, some of them are quite sad, but in the end, we came up with Nobodyz Trash. The reason being is that at the start of the production of marine debris, plastics, rubbish, pollution, whatever it may be, it obviously starts as someone's design. It then moves into somebody's manufacturing, moves into someone's production, somebody's marketing, someone's demand, somebody's selling it, somebody's consuming it, and somebody's using it. It then gets to a point where it's somebody's choice what to do at the end of that, whether to recycle, discard, or put it into landfill. With each one of those, there's obviously things that come out of that. When you look at recycling, there needs to be the incentive to recycle, there needs to be the services to recycle, and there needs to be that ability to recycle. When it goes into landfill, there's things called waste services, so there needs to be that service to deal with that waste. In a lot of cases, you come across these places and there is poor management, and essentially, if you have poor management, a lot of these products still get carried by wind, runoff, etc., and end up in our waterway. So at the end of it, as you all know, it ends up as nobody's trash. Nobody owns it, and nobody takes responsibility for it. So that's why the network's called Nobody's Trash. We're moving towards having people have ownership for our oceans and for what those oceans do for us as Indigenous people. This is where it starts to get scary. So as you can see up here, the modern trend is basically for all consumer goods these days to be a plastic product or a derivative of plastic. The major drivers of plastic include the inexpensive production. See how I did that? There we go, back there. So inexpensive production costs, the prolonged shelf life for foods, and that mass production at cheap prices. And in this world at the moment, the main source of pollution is disposable plastics, and we'll go into that a little bit later. So as you can see up here on this chart, is that plastic was obviously designed and manufactured and started development in the 1960s, and this only goes to 2005, and I can guarantee you now that that chart is off the scale. So basically you can see that it rises up and it's not coming down, and you can see on the bottom line is the recovery, and you can see that's very low at the moment. Essentially it all ends up into the ocean through catchments, and it's received worldwide attention with this discovery of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is essentially a floating continent of plastics. I often joke with my friends that, if the world ends, we'll just go and live on this plastic island, like Waterworld, big Kevin Costner. And, and it's huge, it's bigger than the state of Queensland, that's massive. And there's 100 million tonnes of debris. So essentially what you see floating on the top is not representative what is also underneath. And in a lot of cases, a lot of this rubbish sinks to the bottom of the ocean, and at the moment we've got no idea what's sitting on the bottom of the ocean. God, don't people know that I'm giving a talk? I should turn that off. So, I always say, this is a little bit of a hit of reality. So basically, as I was saying, the plastic especially doesn't biodegrade. It goes into a process of degradation or degradation process, which essentially means that it doesn't break down, it just gets smaller. So it breaks into pieces and becomes smaller pieces. And just back to that other chart, you can see that now less than 5% of plastic is recycled. And given that there's billions of plastic production in the world, and as I was saying, like in in 1999, these small pieces of plastic actually outweighed the zooplankton in the ocean by 6 to 1. Another study was done in 2010, and those bits of plastic outweighed zooplankton by 60 to 1. So just in that short time span, you can see that, you know, it's increased phenomenally, and it's on a rate of increase. Another interesting point that comes out of here is that it takes 500 years for disposable nappies to break down. Well, they don't really break down, they just dissolve into smaller pieces. A six-pack rings takes 400 years. Plastic bottle takes 450 years. So essentially, you know, the plastic that my grandparents were using, just turn that off, is still in the system, and the plastic that your children and your grandchildren use will still be there for a long time, for generations to come. It's interesting that, you know, at a UN environment report estimated that, you know, each square kilometre of the ocean contains 46,000 pieces of floating garbage. And, you know, as I said, like, the garbage pad is huge. I've related it to Queensland in Australia, but if there's any foreign people here, you know, you can also relate it back to that it's, you know, 3 times more than the span of Spain and Portugal combined. You know, that's whole countries, and essentially in a lot of places bigger than continents, small islands, bigger than Fiji, bigger than Hawaii. So this, getting back to in the Pacific, this patch, you know, is essentially putting it into another realm so people can comprehend, is 2,200 kilometres long, and it's 800 kilometres wide. So I'm sure that you guys can picture your hometown and then go somewhere for 800 kilometres, then go somewhere for another 2,200 kilometres. That's how big it is. So this plastic, even though I've been speaking about the North Pacific, it's widespread. So it's not only, you know, in our front door, it's everywhere and growing at a rate of knots. This debris has impacts on human health, the biology and ecology of marine organisms, you know, local and regional and worldwide economies through shipping fouling, the release of toxins, fuels, etc. It's basically, you know, going through all systems of the ocean. As I said, you know, any manufactured or processed solid waste is typically, it's still there. You know, it hasn't gone anywhere, still floating around. And 6.4 million tonnes of debris reaches the ocean each year. 8 million items are discarded into the sea every day. That's like today, you know, 8 million items just went into the ocean as we're walking around talking and meeting and greeting people. Something to think about in the back of your head. So, you know, we talk about plastics a little bit more here because, but I just want to make it clear that with Nobodyz Trash, you know, it's not just about plastics, it's about everything. It's about the toxins that go in and pollute our ocean. It's about the plastics that go in and pollute our ocean. It's about, you know, sewage outfalls. It's about everything. So, and one of the main issues is that land-based pollution source. So, as I said, you know, another thing is, you know, just the statistics are mind-blowing. You know, with 80% of that debris coming from land-based sources, you know, that's essentially us living our lifestyle working, playing, etc. And 20% from ships and marine sources, which includes your ghost nets, your fishing lines, your jigs, the plastic bottles that they drink after they've had fun. Toothbrushes are another thing. I'll brush my teeth, throw it over the ship. That's a weird one, actually. And discarded fishing gear. So I don't know if you guys have seen the ghost nets talk yesterday, but that's another big problem where you've still got these nets floating around in the ocean, still fishing, and basically fishing for anything that comes their way. As I said, in shipping, it comes back to this economic component of propeller fouling, blocked cooling fittings, engines. In fishing, you get reduced catches, having to replace nets, and sorting debris from catches. So in a lot of fishing industry, when they're doing their netting, there's a large amount of debris that comes up with the fish, and that takes time to sort through debris and to sort through the viable catch. That's a good point, and that's where you guys will get to have your say on how we address this sort of stuff, and you're correct. Tourism, so everyone likes to have beautiful country, and when you visit a place, there's sort of an expectation that it's going to be an awesome beach, you're going to have an awesome time, you're going to get a tan, but that's not the case. You get there, but instead of being surrounded by nice, beautiful plants or animals and birds, you're surrounded by marine debris. So it loses that aesthetic. And this can become a barrier to any sort of economic base that you want to set up on country, because a lot of your resources are going into cleaning up the beach rather than looking at your other projects. This is a cost from the US. So basically, it's estimated at $1.265 billion in 2008, and that was lost income. Now, these are statistics that come out of the General Forum of Technical Reports on Marine Debris. Nobodyz Trash is asking you guys to inject some Indigenousness into these technical reports and into this discussion. At the moment, there is really no statistics or no information on how marine debris essentially affects Indigenous communities, and that's worldwide. Nothing on the loss of economic base, nothing on the cost of clean up. So you guys are aware that a lot of our mob do clean up marine debris in country. So one thing that we want to look at is basically getting that information. So as we all know, every time we look at these pictures, we want to cry. That the impacts on wildlife is phenomenal, and it's just for those. It's just it's another stab wound from humans for these guys' existence. Entanglement, ingestion, smothering, loss of habitat, changes or loss in biodiversity. And a lot of these species are also spiritually and resource and economically of benefit to Indigenous people. The other thing is obviously contamination of water supplies, leaching of toxic chemicals from plastic, and the general well-being of environment. These issues probably affect Indigenous people more so. So these sort of things come straight out of just a worldview. What we want to do is highlight how this issue affects Indigenous people. I'll hand over to Jill.
I always struggle with this because I always feel like Debbie Downer up here. it's a really difficult topic, but it's really important that we all become educated as to how our convenience lifestyles are affecting the natural world that we depend on to live. This is basically the current research that's being conducted to solve. These are the basic solutions that are going on right now to address marine debris problems, and they range from the individual level to basically the global level. You can reject plastic. A lot of people do beach cleanups. That's huge all around the world. I know I come from Corvallis, Oregon, and on January 1st, we banned all plastic bags in city limits, and Portland, Oregon has done that as well, and Eugene. There's also international and national laws against, and really all the way down to local laws about catchment to try and stop debris before it enters the ocean. This picture up here is from Southern California, and that was just after one rainstorm. This isn't huge accumulations, it's just one day. And then recently there's been a push to create greener plastics, and a lot of people see that as kind of a positive solution. But unfortunately, as long as they're petrochemically based, basically they're still just breaking down the same way. They just break down quicker, so we don't necessarily see them. But the chemical compositions are actually leaching into soils. There's been lots of tests on beaches with high accumulations of plastic debris, and you'll find a lot of PCBs, BPA, persistent organic pollutants, all sorts of chemicals that are endocrine disruptors, cancer causes, and a lot worse. So all of these solutions are kind of based on this idea of the tragedy of the commons. And in this scenario of the tragedy of the commons, it's really individually based, where an individual will act on their own self-interest, over-consuming a shared or common pool resource, regardless of the consequences. And in order to avoid a tragedy, individuals must cooperate to ensure the best outcome for the resource and the group. And as you can see, successful cooperative actions are rewarded. Those who don't follow these things are punished. And it's really good for solving ecological problems. It's very popular, and it can be effective in creating and fostering solutions. However, it is most effective using strategies based on the tragedy of the commons. It's most effective when it involves small groups, and it assumes a level of equity between all parties involved. Unfortunately, marine plastic debris in the world ocean, and I need to explain, I use the term world ocean because I refuse to name different parts of one body of water. I think these are mental boundaries that need to be eliminated if we're seriously going to address these problems. But marine debris in the world ocean is expected, I'm sorry, I lost my place, give me a second. So marine debris in the world ocean is expected to increase in the future and is only beginning to be understood. This problem is not bounded by borders, and it affects every human and other living organism that's dependent upon the ocean. This problem is too large to be solved and examined as a tragedy of the commons. Inequalities in human populations are real. Priorities for marine ecosystems are different around the world. As I said, I'm an anthropologist, and when I started looking into this problem, I looked at it basically through the lens of political ecology. Political ecology examines the political dimension of human-environmental interaction, and it's really based on 5 ways of looking at things, and they are looking at the different scales of an environmental issue from the local to international level to better understand power relations. It's also a way to create actor-based approaches which focus on all of the people and organizations involved in conflicts over environmental issues. A third strategy is to look at how the historical record has influenced environmental issues today. A fourth is examining the socioeconomic factors such as wealth, age, gender, beliefs, and race. And finally, political ecology is effective in looking at the social construction of natural resources by local actors at each level, paying particular attention to how natural resources are valued, recognizing that such concepts are never innocent of political import. And this is important because while we really care about our oceans, we don't really think about how we actually treat them in the end. When marine debris is examined as a political ecology problem, I immediately think of Indigenous communities. We're disproportionately impacted by marine debris, and we will be so in the future as this problem continues to grow. And I think that unless Indigenous communities work on creating solutions on their own, our voices will not be heard. This is imperative that Indigenous communities start addressing this problem because many Indigenous people practice customs and often live in conditions which increase their exposure to marine debris. This is a serious concern as marine debris can impact the health of Indigenous people through exposure to chemicals and debris at sea, on shore, or in food and water sources. Invasive species, as Chels said, can also threaten important food resources and can really challenge economic opportunities that are really important for impoverished communities. And all of these are really serious threats to the survival of Indigenous cultures. Historically, these groups have been victims of oppression and exploitation by nations and states established under colonialist control. And today, corporations can be added to that list. While many Indigenous people worldwide must contribute to the global capitalist market, they strive to maintain cultural identity, integrity, and sovereignty through language, education, employment, and control of natural resources. The reason I look at marine debris through political ecology is because I think it's a really good strategy for building participation and capacity building within communities. In 2007, in the United States, we missed the opportunity to build baseline data needed to better understand marine plastic pollution, especially in Indigenous communities. Because the first comprehensive volunteer-based study of shoreline plastic debris pollution failed to include 2 places with significant Indigenous populations. The study relied on volunteers to collect data on shoreline debris each month for 5 years. Most volunteers in the study were retired professionals, and most beach monitoring sites chosen for this study were easily accessible year-round. Indigenous populations in the U.S. have a low number of retired professionals, and beaches where Indigenous people live may not be readily accessible due to seasonality, land ownership restrictions, and traditional customs. The final report that was presented to the United States Environmental Protection Agency stated difficulties arose in Alaska and Hawaii when groups did not follow through, due in some part to cultural issues. Future efforts will require significant endorsement of local tribal communities in Alaska and special attention in Hawaii to cultural concerns on various islands. The study shows that to be successful, current research and data collection methods need to change. We are creating Nobodyz trash because Indigenous people have a right to cultures based on clean marine environments. And by creating this network, it is our hope that we as Indigenous people can come together and share our efforts in addressing the problem of marine debris. We want to see Indigenous people create the framework from which methods, procedures, policies, and most importantly, solutions can emerge. And solutions are important because a lot of times Indigenous people are brought in and treated as objects in research, but we're never asked to come up with solutions. And if our particular concerns are going to be met and solved, the solutions need to come from us as well, not other people's solutions imposed on communities. We're creating this network because it's important for several reasons. When Indigenous communities are directly involved, their cultural and ethical concerns are placed on the forefront. The protocols set the standard, and language used in these reports can easily be understood by the communities and the people that created it. And that's really a key, because a lot of times people will come in, do research, maybe you'll get a report back, but it's really nothing that a community can use, because it's technical and very much removed from the actual people that it's supposed to be serving. When Indigenous people own the information they create, true cultural survival, development, and revitalization can occur, and communities can benefit from the positive actions of self-determination. When Indigenous people create spaces where research methods, solutions are based on concepts of kinship and connectivity, holistic relationships with marine environments can truly be expressed. Finally, Chels and I and the people that we work with really want to see Indigenous communities define for themselves how they want to proceed in addressing this ever-increasing global problem.
Okay, so in one aspect of that is basically looking at community participation in mapping. So what we were wanting to do is basically look at Indigenous communities that are already engaged in marine pollution, incentive cleanups, marine debris removal, and then map that. So map each community and hopefully map the loads that are coming off and what the issues are. This then basically gives us a bit of an idea, the spatial knowledge of how many Indigenous communities are involved in this activity and what the activity is. This is an example of some mapping that has taken place on Rottnest Island. So basically it's a series of point locations of where people are undertaking marine debris or marine pollution projects. And essentially, you know, when we want to move this to an international forum and bring to the attention of, you know, such people as the United Nations, we essentially need to have some backup of you know, what's happening at the moment. This then moves into how many items or tonnage is being removed off these beaches, and this is the sort of information that goes towards showing governments, showing international bodies the effort that is put in from Indigenous people to clean up country and to clean up land. Unfortunately, or fortunately in today's realm, we need to have this sort of stuff that gives us that ability to have that conversation at those levels. So as part of the Marine Debris Network, we have set up a website. So one of our other partners is Conservation Biology in the US, who have attachment to NOAA. So these guys have given us access to some of their mapping resources, and we've built this database website.
So how this works is it's a free online data sharing and mapping application. So if you would like to join in our efforts, and so that we can basically share with everybody else what you are doing, you can go to our website, nobodystrash.com, and it is org. I thought so. You can go to nobodystrash.org and you can join. We have a link for a database, and what you do is you click on Join Us, you create an account, and you have access to all the maps that we've created, and you can draw whatever information that you want on those maps so that you can manage your data, and you can share that, but you can also keep it private. So you can share what you would like with other members. You can hold information that you want to keep for yourselves, and it can all be stored in databases. This is an example of the basic map that we have. This shows all the ocean currents, and when you go into databasin, you can actually go in and zoom in on where you are, and you can draw on your maps and put all the data that you would like, and other people can see what's going on, so that maybe together we can kind of own this problem for ourselves and set the example of how to really deal with this problem in the future, rather than relying on other people to do it for us, and also to get away from the idea of self-centered research. This is about building communities, not doing something for yourself. And we just want to leave you with this, because that's basically it. What goes in the ocean goes into you. There's two huge barriers to solving this problem, and one is a lack of understanding, and the other is the persistence and prevalence of plastic. Thank you.
So I need to thank people. So in establishing this, it wasn't something that was just done by Jill and myself. There's a number of people that have been involved in, helping and assisting in how the network can look. And I open that invitation now to you guys as well. And basically, I thank everyone that's there for helping to get it up and running, and I'm hoping that in 1 year, or maybe in 1 month, that's off the scale, and everyone in the Pacific and every ocean, every Indigenous group is on that list. So this is what those look like if you the logos. And I'd like to thank everyone that's been involved. I will leave you with that while we talk. It's full on. So what we want to do is basically open up the floor for you guys to have comment, input, ideas, concepts, etc. You can tell us, if you think the network's crap or whether it needs to change, how you would like it changed. We essentially want Indigenous groups, Indigenous communities to own this network. And essentially, it is about sharing ideas. Someone comes up with awesome methodology. Tangaroa Blue, for example. We already have things established, so it's not about reinventing wheels. So survey sheets, ID booklets, etc. Those sort of things are already in existence, and we don't necessarily need to change them. But if there do need to be changes that suit Indigenous groups or Indigenous people better, that's what we want to know about for sure. Because we need to have these things basically that suit the communities and the people. So. Any comments? There was one over here that was, The other thing is that we've got 2 sheets over here on the wall that just ask a question. So essentially, where we want to go with this is, get a little bit sort of political. I try not to get angry. But this year, many of you don't know that our 2 major initiatives being the work that NELSMA does in the top end at Ghost Nets Australia. These guys weren't funded, they're not getting any more funding. So essentially, these are issues. So while they're not getting funding, there's no economic base there to employ people to do and clean up this area. So that is an issue that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed at a global scale.
delving into marine debris. And 2 years ago, we pretty much chaired a forum just up there with 8 government agencies to come up with a better coordinated approach to marine debris. So just one of the ideas I've got from this talk here is if we write up a contract for a range of groups that work for us, we can quite easily tack on the work on marine debris we haven't done before and make that as part of it as well. So we're currently doing also with no extra funding, we're just doing within what we're currently doing.
Yeah, and that's the information we need, is what groups are undertaking, what you're doing, because we want to inject this Indigenous issue into those world discussions. That, you know, a lot of you guys have probably also read a lot of technical reports on marine debris in the world and world's oceans. A lot of them tend to have this you know, one line that says, you know, marine debris affects developing and third world countries. And that's it. You know, that's all it says. So we need to be able to give to them, these are the issues, this is how it affects us. I know, you know, at home, you know, the debris, you know, it's like, okay, we've collected all this debris. What do we do with it now? Yeah, and Haiti's got a really good story of how, you know, one community put all the plastic and bottles into a truck and drove it to South Australia so they can get the refund. Yeah, which is. That's right. That's absolutely correct. Because, well, that's the source. One of the, you know, main sources of it is changing that design. And you know, I remember it was great fun going shopping with Mum. Go down the shopping centre, and we got brown paper bags. Yeah, that was awesome. So they'd break. That was fun. But still, you know, it could be used for a fire, recycled in the garden. Yeah, it was reusable in some manner. So yes. Putting responsibility back on designers and manufacturers as well. Absolutely.
Just in terms of the software, we've big push at the moment, and we've picked it up, just the eye tracker. So I don't know whether there is compatibility there, or is it just standalone?
I think we're open to a number. So I'm a big fan of the eye tracker. So with the eye tracker, essentially what we can facilitate is something like Tangaroa Blue's survey sheet to be put into eye tracker. Yeah, cool. So that platform's already there. All right, well, we can negotiate to make that available to other communities that have the actual tool. Other than that, you know, it would be on these sheets. But yeah, that's a fantastic idea, and then that data is stored. It can be sent to us and kept in the community. And one thing that we do want to do is basically keep everyone networking. So on this website, we're hoping that people are constantly using it as theirs. You know, photos, your unusual things, how you feel, what you went out and you've seen something. So everything. But I think one of the more important things is having that data and having those stats that put us in the picture. Yeah.
We're talking about what's gathering on beaches and things at the moment. Why isn't the rest of the world looking at that island? That's everybody's problem, not just our problem in Australia. That's the world problem.
Absolutely.
Why has it become a global issue?
I'll answer that one because, like I said, the number one reason and the number one challenge to solving this problem is a general lack of awareness. There's actually 5 large accumulations of plastic in the ocean. We hear about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, but we don't hear about one in the Indian Ocean and all these other oceans. And that's why I say we need to quit referring to them as separate places, because it is all one, because it is a global problem. And basically that's why we're here discussing this, so that we can raise awareness that this is a problem and it does belong to everybody. And it just really starts with all of us going out and spreading the word. that it's a huge issue, it's a reality, it's here, and we need to deal with it. I agree.
No? One of our contributors actually did come up with a very good idea about that, which was basically sourcing some funding to make a commercial. So it then goes on to commercial television, it goes into magazines, so it totally puts it in people's faces. And the issue, that Jill spoke about with, the release of toxins. For myself, the ocean is very, very important to me, both spiritually and for my cultural traditions. That's where my food comes from. I swim in it, I love it, wet the scales. I come from a family of fish. And to see also my brothers and sisters being whales, dolphins, marine birds, turtles, dying and choking, the horrible deaths on this stuff, it's heartbreaking. And then to know that potentially, the effect of this also then goes into my cousins, my uncles, my aunts, through the chemicals that are released is also scary. It is a known fact that the microplastics end up in a lot of the fish that we eat. And that in itself is pretty scary. It ends up in turtles. And that is an issue, for Indigenous people, because that's essentially impinging on our cultural rights. That's right. That's what I talked about, incentives to recycle. I remember when I was younger, for the aluminium cans and bottles, collect them, get a bag of them, and that's a paddle pop and a packet of chips. But that incentive is not there. But and then you see some Indigenous groups, and that's why I love my culture. Because out of adversities, we can always make something good somehow, laugh about it, make something good. And I think Ghost Nets Australia is a perfect example of where they've taken this debris and turned it into a somewhat economic base in arts and craft. It's having that end result, but it shouldn't be getting to that amount of accumulation, and that's what the problem is. And it's also us as Indigenous people taking the incentive. A lot of us own businesses, a lot of us are users. You're making that choice when you go to the shopping centre. How much plastic is this product wrapped in? Where is this going to end up? I'm swimming down the river, and someone's flicked the cigarette butt, and it's like, hey man, that's going to end up in that brim that you catch tomorrow, and It needs to have that education also in communities and in businesses, and I can guarantee you that there's a whole population of people that would not even think that marine debris affects Indigenous people in these ways. Straight over the top. Please.
I was just going to say we work a lot with the owners of the Great Barrier Reef through the Marine Park Authority, and obviously many of our traditional owner groups are undertaking work with Kangaroo Blue and of their own accord doing the cleanups, etc. We've also got like a reef guardian schools where we go into primary schools and there's a whole network of good marine education and that type of stuff. So is there a kit or something that can go into schools and just give this talk and like at that level, or even just education, because it's something that my whole team can start to do, and can we buy t-shirts?
Absolutely. And that might be, if we sell the t-shirts, if you guys are willing to, because at the moment we've got no funding. So we get no funding to do anything. We're just, like every other, Indigenous community starting from scratch or nothing. So that might be a good incentive to sell t-shirts, and then firstly put it into some sort of education kit that, will, I hope, and if the first thing is that we're asking that, if you guys join this network, and then we basically have a network base where we can then start sharing materials and building together how, if there's an education kit that needs to be put together, how that's put together, what needs to go into it, so everyone's contributing to how it looks and what the message is.
Thank you for the great upload of today. I'm a smoker, and I try to be responsible, above my cigarettes. But the City of Sydney actually had a great little container on a kiwi, like the little chocolate sort of shakers in your coffees, yes. And it was excellent, because you can put your butts in it, and it had, safe halogens on the little container and on a keyring, very handy. And I was just thinking about when we talk about promoting, Happy Feet was such a great movie, and I think that sent a good message about plastics and the effects of our marine life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chels, just wanted to mention that the education kit, Tamara Lewis has done a marine debris education kit through the national curriculum, and it has a lot of resources there from kindergarten through to senior years, and it's available on the website to download for teachers and anybody else that's interested free of charge. So while it might not be directly linked to the Indigenous component, there is Indigenous sectors of that, and so there is a resource there that's available at the moment that people can use. If something else needs to be developed, that's fine, but in the meantime, there's a resource there if anyone needs to use.
And maybe we can adapt and use that so it's more focused onto Indigenous communities. Yeah, cool. So one thing at home that our Jindajari rangers are starting to do is make posters and stickers that are specifically directed at mob. So you see a lot of marine debris stuff like that Japanese sushi. It's tray. So and making them funny, but having that hard-hitting message, with them. I make my own little posters and I send them out to friends. A lot of them are X-rated, but they're funny. But doing up those posters is another thing, and we're more than happy to assist in putting a template together, so that you get back to your community, take some photos, put the message in, and so that you're putting that in the community as well and raising awareness and education.
And I just want to add, thank you for letting us know about that. But the point of Nobodyz Trash is that the Indigenous people's concerns are number one, because compartmentalizing us into one little box doesn't address the fact that we don't separate our connections to the ocean and marine life. They are, I don't know how to say this. You can't separate spirituality from economics, from health, because I know for my people, it's all one. And, that's kind of the problem with research now is, you separate it all up, and then at the end, and then here's our little Indigenous part. The point of what we want to do is saying, no, this is about the whole thing, and that your Indigenousness needs to be addressed so that all of these things are met, and that it speaks to the community members. I know I get turned off a lot of times when I do reports and stuff, and at the end, and here's the Indigenous part too, because I refuse to be compartmentalized, and I want to do this because I don't want to see that compartmentalization continue. Yes.
Yeah, I think the media, thanks for the presentation from the journalists. We do a little bit of plastic work from the reason. And I think media is the way to go, but you might have to go to extreme. When we quiet and shy, nobody listens to us. You know, we need to go and get this pile of plastics and dump it in front of these big manufacturers. You know, even just putting a pile of plastic out in front. You know, we got medias here. It's fortunate we don't have medias in here to make it. It's great presentation. And the plastic is a worldwide problem.
That's right.
It affects everybody, you know.
Yep.
So we should find some funds and look at media.
Yes.
Extreme media.
I like your style.
And yeah, that's one of the things we were, on the balcony and the motel going at about 12:30. Oh, we should go down and forage through the bins and grab out all the plastic that was used for dinner last night.
That's an awesome point, because I know you wanted this to be a workshop, but anytime we provide any kind of event, whether it's from government through to community, let's think about how we're doing it. Because I've spent a lot of time, with schools and communities and doing events, and every time you go there, the outcome is that we want to do an event, but all those little parts of how that event gets put together sometimes doesn't get looked at. And the amount of plastic that gets used in events like last night, we're here talking about saving and protecting saltwater country. How much plastic has been used in this event that didn't even get thought about as part of that event? When we try and do conferences, we talk to the conference organisers and say we want to have plastic-free events. We need to start thinking about this in every single part of organising whatever we're organising. When you go to the supermarket, you take your reusable bags. When you don't use the plastic water bottles and you buy them, it has to be ingrained in part of what we do to actually make a difference. And the media is part of that, but we are part of that. We need to change the way we do things and not blame everybody else. We need to also take responsibility for that in every single part of our lives, and part of that is this conference.
Absolutely. Nobody's trash. We need to own it.
Exactly. Totally.
Before you start, I want to say, at the moment there's a photo shoot happening. Yeah, so lunch is also on the go as well. I know how quickly they put things out and take away down there. Cover up that good thing. I was thirsty. For those of you who want to stay and continue discussion and get some concepts or ideas that we can then start working on, that'd be awesome. But if you have to go and have a modelling room, get your photo taken, it'll be a part of the photo shoot. Do that, but we're going to be in here for the next 10-15 minutes, noting out what's required and what people would like and where they'd like to see this whole thing sort of go.
One last thing, please fill out your survey and leave it at the door. That's actually our baseline data, so the more we get, the more we can do. And the posters as well, please.
Yeah, apologies for the poster, please.